We are a few days away from celebrating the Yom Tov of Hanukkah. As Chazal defined the Yom Tov, I always find one line striking. Leshona acheres kovim ve'osum yomim tovim behalel v'hoidah. Why did they not establish the Yom Tov right then and there? Why wait an entire year? I once saw a magnificent explanation that provides a powerful perspective on the whole celebration of Hanukkah. The Jewish people had experienced many nisim, similar, if not greater than the ones of Hanukkah. But no Yom Tov was established because the inspiration and chizuk that resulted did not last very long. It faded. Hanukkah was different. When the Chashmonaim saw that an entire year had passed since the nisim took place, and Klal Yisrael was as inspired and mechuzek as the day it happened, they understood this time was different. This experience will remain as a source of hisayrus for all future generations, because it opened up our eyes to see the Yad Hashem and the Yeshuas of Hashem in all aspects of life. I believe that the Aguda is in some small measure the personification of this Yesod. This superhuman dedication of the staff of 42 Broadway and the directors across the country are our modern-day Chashmonaim, fighting the forces of the Misyavnim and the Yevanim of our time. But the most powerful attribute that they represent is that they never lose sight of the Yad Hashem, and they never lose inspiration and chizuk that the Nisim of Hanukkah taught us. At the helm of this holy organization is a true servant of Hashem and of Klal Yisrael, with extraordinary dedication and true humility. We are very fortunate to have Rabbi Chaim Dovid Zwiebel as the one leading us during these times. It is an honor to call upon Rabbi Zwiebel to address us.
Yashikei Chachem, Rav Moshe, thank you for those very warm words. Good Tavach, everybody. It's a pleasure and an honor to have this opportunity to address the Chashavat Tzibur that is gathered virtually to participate in this very unusual convention. Rishus, Rosh Yeshiva and Rabbanim, and Kol HaKol HaKodesh Hazeh. I wanted to start just by acknowledging the remarkable work that Rabbi Moshe Matz and all of the other regional directors of Agudas Yisrael of America throughout the United States, working in different states and all the different states where there are major Jewish populations, and accomplishing so very much in very difficult and challenging circumstances. And it's really an honor and a pleasure to work with such dedicated servants, dedicated people to whom the idea of doing something for Klal Yisrael means everything to them. And they sacrifice so much. We all owe them a tremendous Yasher Koyach. And I'm glad we're here tonight with an opportunity to say thank you to Rabbi Moshe and to all of his chaverim, all of his colleagues, all across the United States who work under the banner of Agudas Yisrael. This is really a very different feeling than an ordinary convention is. Usually, I'm standing up in front of, on Motzei Shabbos, in front of a room full of 1,000+ people, and you speak, and as you speak, there's interaction with people in the audience, you see their faces. I was especially spoiled this year when on January 1st, I was given the honor of saying a few words at the Siyam Hashas, and when I looked up and looked around and I saw 90,000 people, what a remarkable feeling that was. And now, tonight, I'm standing in front of a couple of cameras and some wonderful cameramen who are doing a great job in putting this virtual convention together. It's very different. It's a different feeling. It's a different metzias. The world has changed. And in a way, it's a come down. And it's difficult. But this is really only the smallest of the difficulties that Klal Yisrael has been facing in the era of COVID. Parnasa, people losing their jobs, entire industries going out of business. Gesund, the number of people who have been infected by the disease and who have fallen ill to one degree or another. Rahman al-Itzlan, the number of karbanis that we've lost. The restrictions on yeshivas, on shuls, on our summer camps, all of the things that have made these last several months so very, very difficult, and the rising anti-Semitism that we experience as this epidemic, as this pandemic moves forward throughout across the globe. And perhaps V'al Kulam is the uncertainty, the feeling of, what does Hashem want from us? What is going on? We don't know what tomorrow will bring. Things change constantly. Red zone, yellow zone, orange zone. So many different changes. After 4 months or 3 months, a long hiatus over the course of the summer, and now a second stage, and in some places a third stage. The question is, how do we maintain in an era like the one we live today, which is so challenging and presents us with so many different nisyanos hachayim and so many painful experiences? How do we maintain our mental health? How do we maintain our equilibrium when we're buffeted by so many forces from all different sides and all different angles that are making life so complicated and so difficult? How do we maintain our equilibrium? I saw a beautiful vart from Rab Mendel Mirimenev, the Sefer Be'er Menachem, 2 weeks ago in Parshas Chayei Sarah. We say that all of the years of Shnei Chayei Sarah were kulan shavais l'taiva. They were all equal, that they were all wonderful, they were all good. Really? Sarah Imenu? The life that she lived? The hardships that she endured as an akara for so many years? The bizyainis she suffered when Hagar came into the house of Avram as a second wife? Her being taken captive by Parai, by Avimelech. This was Kulan Shavais L'Taiva? Sarah Imenu had one of the most difficult lives that anybody could ever imagine. Zogt the Rimeniva. We say Shivisi Hashem L'Negdi Samid. And what does that mean? Shivisi comes from the word Shava. Shava means equilibrium, balance. Things are steady. Even though all kinds of things are happening, but there's still shivisi. How is one zaycha? How is one privileged to merit that very special madrega of shivisi, of equilibrium? And the answer is Hashem L'Negdi Samid. A person who realizes that everything comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is there, and He's the one who's orchestrating everything. So if we know that, and we know that Kol Man Di'avid Rachmana L'Tava Avid, everything that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does is for the good. So then, of course, Shivisi, you know how we're able to accept everything with equanimity and maintaining our equilibrium? By recognizing that Hashem L'Negdi Samid. And that's Pshat and Sarah Imenu. Kulan Shavais. They were all identical. Sarah was able to handle every situation with a steady, straight, ongoing path. Why? The Taiva, because she recognized that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was the one who was orchestrating everything. And if it's Hashem who is behind it, Kol man da'avid rachmana l'tav avid. So kulan shavais, because Sarah Imenu was on that madrega of a shivisi person who saw Hashem L'Negdi Samid, therefore it was l'taiva. And I think that's what we have to take away in our own lives as we face the challenges and the roller coaster of emotions that all the difficult situations that present themselves require us to digest and to deal with. If we remember at all times Hashem L'Negdi Samid, Hashem is always there. And He's the one who's pulling the strings. No matter who is elected President of the United States, He is the one, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one who is pulling the strings. Leiv Melech B'yad Hashem. No matter what else is going on, what Dr. Fauci may say or what the other person may say, They reveal themselves days later or weeks later or months later to say something just the opposite. But the bottom line is HaKadosh Baruch Hu is pulling all the strings. And therefore it's for our good. It's for the benefit of Klal Yisrael. Hashem L'Negdi Summit. But there's another aspect of Shivisi Hashem L'Negdi Summit which I wanted to talk about tonight. And that is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with me at all times. When I go out in the street, I carry HaKadosh Baruch Hu with me. Ushemenu karasa bishmecha, we say in our davening on the Yom Neiroim. Klal Yisrael is called with HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us the name Yisrael, which is the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kel, Yashar Kel. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us this name because he's identifying Klal Yisrael as his people. So when Klal Yisrael does things, when Klal Yisrael goes out into the world and is evaluated by the world, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a great stake in that evaluation. HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, Kaviyachal, the reputation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is at stake. Because when a Yid goes out into the street, Hashem is with him. The Gemara in Yuma, the famous Gemara, which we've spoken about a number of times over the years here at the Aguda Convention. V'yohavtu es Hashem alekecha, the Gemara brings a brisa. You should love Hashem, your God, and it doesn't simply mean you should love Hashem, but sheyehei shem shamayim misahev al yodecha, that the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu should become beloved through your actions. Why? Because when a Yid does something, then all the eyes of the world are upon that Yid, the spotlight is shined on that Yid, then you start thinking, saying if the Yid behaves in a certain way, in a beautiful way, the Gemara says somebody who learned Torah, his father taught him Torah, his Rabbi taught him Torah, and then he goes out into the world and he speaks to others in a refined way, and he conducts himself in his business with integrity, that person creates Kiddush Hashem. Why? Because if the observer notices this and says, Ashrei mi shalamdai Torah, fortunate is the one who learned Torah. Ashrei mi shalimdai Rabbi Torah. Ashrei mi shalimdai Dovid Torah. Fortunate is the one who learns Torah. The Torah is made to be something very special through the actions of the people who learned the Torah. And not just the Torah, but also the Naisen HaTorah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, Kaviyachal, is elevated. Yisrael asher b'cha espa'ar. Klal Yisrael, I become glorified through you, through your actions. And then the Gemara says, Chas v'shalom, the opposite. This was Kiddush Hashem, but this Chilul Hashem also, the same person who went to yeshiva and he learned, and his father taught him Torah, his Rabbi taught him Torah. He goes out into the world and his business dealings are not with integrity, and he speaks in a coarse manner. So on that person, people will look at them and say, Ay laila aviv shalimdai Torah, Ay laila rabbi shalimdai Torah. Look, the Torah didn't make him better. This person is a lowlife like the rest of us. And yet he went to yeshiva. And that creates the opposite of Shetehei Shem Shamayim Misahev Al Yodecha. That creates Chilul Hashem. So if we realize that Yisrael v'Yaraisa v'Kudsha Berichu Chadhu, that Klal Yisrael and the Torah Akdaisha and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is all one, and that therefore Shivisi Hashem L'Negdi Summit, Hashem is with me all the time. I have to realize when I walk out into the street, I'm not alone. I'm walking with HaKadosh Baruch Hu hanging on to me. And my actions will determine how the people of the world who are watching me will think about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What a remarkable achrayus that imposes upon us. Rabbi say, let's spend a few minutes talking about compliance. And when I mean compliance, I'm talking about those things which the consensus of the world around us, of the scientific community, of the governmental community, of the medical community, the consensus is that these are the sorts of things that we should be doing in order to minimize health risks of COVID-19. I'm talking about face coverings. I'm talking about social distancing. I'm talking about avoiding large crowds. Those sorts of things, which there's a clear consensus among the medical community that these are things that people should be doing. In some places, they're talking about mandating through law certain things. Face coverings becoming a national law is one of the things that's being discussed. How are we doing on this? When we walk out on the street carrying HaKadosh Baruch Hu along with us, when the eyes of the world are upon us, and look closely as to how we're doing in this respect, are we creating a situation where people say, Ashrei mi shalim dayaviv Torah? Or are we saying the opposite? Are they saying the opposite? Toward what end do we take these things lightly? Mela, if we're talking about a decree of the government that requires us to shut down our yeshivas, our Moistes HaTorah, or if we're speaking about a decree of government that puts a strict numeric limitation on the number of people who can come into a shul to daven, regardless of the size of the shul. Well, obviously, those are the sorts of things where we'd have to go to our Gedolei Yisrael and say, should we be fighting? We'd have to listen to what our medical experts are saying as to why there's a shutdown in these basic institutions of shuls, yeshivas, and so on. And we go to the Gedolei Yisrael, and then we could ask ourselves the question legitimately, is this something that should be resisted? How can it be resisted? What is the responsible way of doing it? In Agudas Yisrael, we've done so according to the hadracha of the Gedolei Yisrael, of the Moetzes Gedolei HaTorah, who have instructed us as to the types of steps we can and should take under those circumstances when what's at stake is so fundamental and central to our lives as Yidden, even to the point of authorizing us to start a federal litigation against Governor Cuomo of New York for some of the restrictions that he imposed upon shuls. So, yes, I'm not saying that we should be taking things lying down when that's what's at stake. But when what's at stake is the convenience, the comfort of not having to walk around with masks on our face, when the rest of society is walking around with masks on their faces, when we're talking about finding ways to tone down our simchas, to make sure that we try to avoid large gatherings, what's at stake there? Is it really worth creating a situation when we go out into the street that people will point at us, that the newspapers will write articles about us, that people will mock us and say that we don't care about our own health, we don't care about other people's health, we don't care about our children's health? Is it really worth it for that? Burning masks in the street as part of a protest demonstration? Rabbi say, there are so many arguments that are made as to why these sorts of medical precautions should be taken by people. Number one, the medical issue itself. We are in the midst of a pandemic, and it's brutal, and sometimes it's even fatal. And nobody knows that as well as our community because we have been hit so very, very hard. It's a real medical issue. Besides that, we're generating anti-Semitism. Look at the comments page. Whenever there's a story like that in the newspaper about a very large wedding or whatever it may be, and look at the comments and what people say. The anti-Semitism that's being generated through these kinds of activities. People come to Agudas Yisrael and ask us to be shtadlonim, to be advocates for the community. Do you know how much harder it has become to advocate effectively for the community in light of these types of situations, in light of the fact that when the spotlight is shined on Klal Yisrael, what emerges is something which is not at all appealing? But most of all, perhaps, v'al kulam, the Chilul Hashem Shabai. I don't mean to assign blame or to point fingers at any particular individual or any particular community. And it's also very possible that the Rabbanim who lead those communities, they have certain perspectives which, of course, have to be respected. So I don't mean to criticize or blame anybody. But I can't help but remind myself of the Gemara, famous Gemara in Perek HaNizaken, that we learn on Tisha B'Av, the story of Kamtza Bar Kamtza, and how Bar Kamtza, as he was being escorted out of the party that Kamtza had called, he said that there are so many Rabbanim over here, and nobody is saying a word. And Midashaski Rabbanan Shma Mina Denichalahu. Since the Rabbanim are quiet about this, it must be that they think it's fine, there's no problem. And that's what caused him to start the process which led to the Churban Habayis. I don't want people to say Midashaski Rabbanan Shma Mina Denichalahu as to what's going on in certain parts of our community. Baruch Hashem, the Rav Minyan of Binyan of Klal Yisrael is wonderful, and we do so many things which really elevate us so high above, farther above the society around us. But we can't be shasky. We can't be quiet when we see things that lead to Chilul Hashem. Rabbi say, it's not nichalahu. It is not nichalahu. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu give us the opportunity, Dafka Achshav, at a time like this, when the eyes of the world are trained so closely upon us, when we know that so much is at stake for ourselves and for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who has invested His name in us. So much is at stake. Rabbi say, Dafka Achshav. Let's concentrate and do the things that show Kiddush Hashem, not the opposite, Chas v'Shalom. Let's remember that our mandate is Yisrael Achsher B'cha Espa'ar. We want to bring glory to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name. HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes so much pride in us. That's what we have to look for. One of the terrible losses we suffered this year, as we heard several times over the course of this convention, was the loss of the Novominsker Rebbe. Zeichet Tzadik v'Kodesh L'Vracha. On a personal level, I owed so much of everything in my own life, my public life, my personal life, to the Rebbe, who was mekarev me so much. I loved him so much. All of us did. Anybody who had the schus of knowing him recognized his godless in so many different ways. And in terms of Klal Yisrael, he was a leader. He was a person who was a true manhig b'Yisrael. It's so difficult without him. The world has become more challenging, and as one of the great Rosh Yeshiva once told me, the Problemen werden was größer, the problems get greater and greater, and the Menschen was behandeln the Problemen werden was kleiner. The people who have to deal with these problems are becoming smaller and smaller. The Novominsker Rebbe was a giant. To do proper zikaron for him, and how he elevated us, and how he created us, he helped elevate us to the point where we were in fact a Klal Yisrael, Yisrael Asher B'cha Espar, that the Rabbeinu Shalom was glorified through those actions. His own words are the ones which are most meaningful to us at this particularly sensitive moment in history. And I think that it will be a special privilege for us tonight to hear the Novominsker Rebbe in his own words speak to us. A gute Woche, and thank you very much.